Let me tell you a story. It was December 1st, 2023. Being that it was that time of the year, I set out to do some Christmas shopping. So I headed to the cornerstone of American commerce, the nucleus of 21st century trade, Walmart. I have to admit, I did not buy any gifts for my loved ones there on that day, because frankly, there wasn't anything good. But I did end up buying something for myself. Because while I was wandering the aisles looking for presents, I came across a display of Lego sets prominently featuring a character I've known and loved for many years, Shadow the Hedgehog. My love for Shadow goes all the way back to his inception, in the days of playing Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the Nintendo GameCube. I had already been a fan of Sonic for a while, mostly from playing Sonic Advance titles on the GBA, but Shadow was not Sonic. Shadow was cooler, more mysterious. So I bought that Shadow the Hedgehog Lego set, at least I tried to. Here's a photo I took of it in my Walmart basket as I waited for a self-checkout kiosk to open. But when I got there and scanned it, I was met with an ominous error message. Restricted item. I flagged down the octogenarian woman assigned to the self-checkout lanes and asked for her help. She pressed on the screen a few times, then ran away, then returned and told me the perplexing truth. She told me that the Shadow the Hedgehog escape set, item number 76995, ages 8 and up, was not available for sale yet. I told her that I just grabbed it off the shelf and there was a whole display. It's not like I snuck into the back room and swiped it from there. She said that didn't matter, they weren't allowed to sell it yet. I was very confused as to why they would have Lego sets out that aren't able to be sold yet, but there's only so much arguing with a Walmart employee that I can handle. But I knew I had to have this Lego set. I'm a big Lego fan, and I have a number of sets I proudly display in my living room, like this camera, this bonsai tree, this ship in a bottle, and this globe. So not only was this an awesome looking Lego set, it was Shadow the Hedgehog, a character I thought Sega had relegated to the eternal back burner. Plus, there was attention to detail with this set that I thought would never resurface. The design of the box is clearly inspired by Radical Highway from Sonic Adventure 2, and the motorcycle featured the logo from Shadow's dedicated game. This detail in particular I found very intriguing. Shadow the Hedgehog is not a game I expected Sega to acknowledge, especially in the 2020s. So seeing it completely out of the blue, in Walmart, I needed this set. Being unable to purchase it at the self-checkout, I did the only reasonable thing, ordering it from Lego.com while sitting in my car in the Walmart parking lot. Man, isn't the future great? I forgot about it until a week later when I opened the package and thought, oh cool, I'll build this tomorrow, and then put it in my bedroom closet where it has sat up until I made this video. I had a feeling I might want to incorporate this set into a video somehow, but I didn't know how until later, because I have an unironic love for Shadow the Hedgehog. And if I have not proven that enough through my purchasing of a Lego set, allow me to show my depravity one more time. Yes, I own a Shadow the Hedgehog t-shirt. It's an all-over print too, check out the back. So why do I have this? Well, buying it wasn't entirely intentional. I was originally looking for a shirt to wear to Too Many Games 2021, and I wanted a shirt with just the logo. I thought it would be a subtle, like, if you know kind of thing. And so I didn't find a shirt with just the Shadow the Hedgehog logo that was to my liking, but I did find this. I was a bit apprehensive about buying it because on one of those sites that you can't be too sure about. I figured that at best, they would just take my money and disappear, and at worst, I would find out that my $26.98 would be used to fund terrorism in some country a dozen time zones away. But that was a risk I was willing to take. So count me surprised when 3 weeks after I made the order, I got an email that it had shipped. It was too late to wear to Too Many Games 2021, but thankfully, I already had this awesome Nintendo sweater. I got this in the Nintendo New York store, which if you're ever in Manhattan, it's totally worth going there. It's awesome. And lo and behold, this Shadow the Hedgehog t-shirt did finally arrive. Not only was it delivered, it delivers. This shirt is, without a doubt, the most daring item of clothing I own. It's kind of an athletic material, but you will never see me wearing this to the gym. I've worn it to a few local Comic-Cons, but that's about it. But now you get to see me wear this embarrassing, ostentatious, wonderful shirt. And if you want one yourself, Sorry, you're out of luck. I ordered it from a website called takavas.us, and when you go to it now, yep, it's gone. I'm pretty sure it was some shady dropshipping site, but look, I actually got the shirt. I'm not gonna complain. When I die, please bury me in this. It's who I am, and I am all of me. So let me take you on a journey through the many games that Shadow the Hedgehog has appeared in and try to explain my appreciation for a dark and brooding, enthralling, anthropomorphic hedgehog. Sonic Adventure 2 was released for the Sega Dreamcast on June 19th, 2001. It was directed by Takashi Iizuka, who also directed the first Sonic Adventure, plus a couple games after that we'll get to later. It's funny to realize that Sonic Adventure 2 was released after the Dreamcast was discontinued, by about 2.5 months. But of course, Adventure 2 eventually found new life on the Nintendo GameCube, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Steam. Sonic Adventure 2 is the first time you can play as the bad guys in a Sonic game. With each of the core Sonic heroes having a dark counter, Shadow was born out of a need for another speedy hedgehog. The Sonic Adventure 2 version of Shadow is the best iteration of him we've seen to date. He's not overly edgy as some might paint as a caricature of him, but what he is competent. The entire game, he's 2 steps ahead of everyone. He carries a cool, calm demeanor, which perfectly fits his now iconic design. Shadow's gameplay in Sonic Adventure 2 is also top tier. While he is capable of hitting a pretty high max speed, he's always controllable. You never feel like he's going to do something you don't want him to do. Aside from running, you'll mostly just jump and homing attack, but that's perfectly fine. In a game with 3 different playstyles and 6 different characters, you don't want any one to be overly complicated. So I think Sonic Adventure 2, while it has a lot of flaws, most of them are relegated to the Tails/Eggman and Knuckles/Rouge portions of the game. Playing as Sonic and Shadow was consistently fun, and so I think for the next 3D Sonic game, it would have made sense to expand on these parts. Get rid of the non-speedy gameplay, give us more Sonic and Shadow levels, and everyone would be happy. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. Sonic Heroes was released for the Nintendo GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC initially on December 30th, 2003. Great job getting in there in time for the holiday season, guys. It was once again directed by Takashi Iizuka and features 4 different playable teams consisting of 3 characters each. One of these teams was Team Dark, led by none other than Shadow the Hedgehog. In this game, Shadow has amnesia following the events of Sonic Adventure 2. I found this confusing as a kid, because I played both Heroes and Adventure 2 around the same time, and I didn't know which one came out first. So I wasn't sure if Heroes was first and Shadow still had amnesia in Sonic Adventure 2. Sonic Heroes isn't as story-based as Adventure 2, and Shadow plays a smaller role in it. After all, he's now 1/12 of the playable characters instead of 1/6. Personally, I think Shadow having amnesia is just an excuse for him to not have to do that much in the game. In Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow was the driving factor behind the entire plot. In Heroes, he's just along for the ride. The only interesting aspect to Shadow's story here is introducing the fact that he might just be a robot that looks like Shadow. For me, I'd be bummed out if every appearance of Shadow post-Adventure 2 was an android instead of the real thing, but it's a unique idea. It's very much left open-ended, I assume because the writers hadn't made up their minds, but it's something. The gameplay of Sonic Heroes, though? Ugh. Sonic Heroes is what I'd consider to be my least favorite Sonic game. That's right, even worse than that other one. Don't worry, we'll get to that. While in Sonic Adventure 2 you feel like you're in control of the character you're playing as at all times, in Heroes you feel like you're not in control at any time. It's by far the slipperiest platformer I've ever played. It feels like one slight nudge of the analog stick will send you flying off one of the many, many bottomless pits scattered throughout the game. There's some very nice looking stages, and the music is great, as you'd expect from a Sonic game, but the controls, my god. In the first couple of stages, things aren't too bad, but by the time you get to late game, you're ready to pull your hair out and use it as kindling to burn whatever hardware you're using to play it. I remember, some time ago, seeing rumors that a remake or remaster of Sonic Heroes was in development. A remake, I can get behind. Tear it all down and build it back up. A remaster? As in, a fresh coat of paint but don't change the gameplay type of remaster? To anyone who's excited for that possibility, I want to ask, have you played Sonic Heroes recently? I'm sorry, but it's not as good as you may remember. But Sonic Heroes, with its bright, colorful, Saturday morning cartoon aesthetic, was followed by something much darker. A game for real bad boys. A game that you don't tell your mom you're playing. The most Shadow the Hedgehog-y Shadow the Hedgehog game, Shadow the Hedgehog. Released on November 15th, 2005, Shadow the Hedgehog was once again directed by Takashi Iizuka. Rather than the format of the previous 3D Sonic games, which had multiple characters interweaving through one story, this game features one character, Shadow, whose story can take any number of different directions. Shadow the Hedgehog is a very enticing game. The box art is super cool looking. I think it's even good enough to be on a t-shirt. The back of the box continues the exciting promises. Nothing gets in the way of Shadow. Exhilarating action, speed, and shooting. Sign me up! When you start the game, you're greeted by what might be the most badass intro movies in all of gaming. I don't care what anyone says. I love this song. This song is in my workout playlist, so yes, I've said a good few PRs to the Shadow the Hedgehog soundtrack. The clips that play are awesome too. When watching it for the first time, your brain is filled with, "Oh, what's that? Am I gonna get to do that? Whoa, that looks so cool!" Nothing gets you hyped up to play a game like this intro. Once you go in and start a new story, you're greeted by another beautifully animated cutscene. And you think, God damn, this game is awesome so far. I can't wait to see what the gameplay is like. But as you'll soon find out, the best way to experience Shadow the Hedgehog is to boot it up, watch the intro cutscene, and then turn it off. Because it's all downhill from there. The big flaw of the gameplay is that it's basically just Sonic Heroes, but without the other two team members. Shadow controls the same as he did in Heroes, many of the character models are the same, and there's even some content from Heroes left over in the game's data. So for a self-admitted hater of the original game, the fact that Shadow the Hedgehog isn't much more than a Sonic Heroes ROM hack is a big disappointment. In terms of the gameplay differences between this and Sonic Heroes, besides the fly and power characters missing, there's one main hook that everyone knows about: guns. That's right, Shadow the Hedgehog is the only Sonic game to have a stamp of approval from the NRA. The game's advertising makes it known everywhere possible that, hey, this is the one with guns. Shadow holds some sort of a rocket launcher on the cover art. On the back, you can see him with a gun that's bigger than he is. There was a statue made of Shadow holding a gun for E3, which led to us getting the funniest photo ever taken. The menu plays a gun cocking sound when you go to select something. And the intro starts with him cocking an SMG, which even I, as a limp-wristed, avocado toast-eating, student debt-having liberal, know to be not how that works. As cringeworthy as the idea of a cartoon hedgehog using realistic guns might be, I'm not against it. At some point, an idea transitions from being cringy to enjoyably cheesy, which I think is the case here. So the problem is not that the game has guns. The problem is that it doesn't lean into this aspect enough. The idea of Shadow using realistic guns is overblown because when you play it, you realize you're using the alien laser guns or Eggman's guns just as much, if not more, as the realistic ones. Shadow using alien weapons isn't nearly as interesting of a marketing hook as seeing him use something you'd see posted as a haul from a drug bust, so the fact that you're using nondescript blob guns so much of the time feels like a bait and switch. This goes into a larger thematic problem with the game. Despite the plethora of memes about Shadow using the word damn or telling Eggman that he's going to hell, it isn't nearly as dark as it's made out to be. In fact, if you remove these few instances of 4th grade level edginess, it's not much different in tone from the last few 3D Sonic games. The game might have been marketed as having a darker tone for an older audience, but when you play it, it's clearly geared toward the same young demographic that had Sonic Adventure and Heroes. I get that there's only so much maturity you can squeeze into an E10 plus rating, and the world will be swallowed by the song long before we ever get an M-rated game in the Sonic the Hedgehog universe. But still, it feels like we were sold one thing, but then given something else. I don't want to go too far into the minutiae of the gameplay here, but there are some points I want to make. First off, for as much of a marketing focus as the guns got, in the game they're not very useful. The lack of any aiming ability makes them frustrating to use, so most of the time I just stick with the homing attack. The Chaos powers are also poorly implemented. There's 2 different abilities you can do. Chaos Blast, which you get from doing evil things, and Chaos Control, which charges up from doing good things. Chaos Blast is fine, but the combat is so simple it doesn't give you much of an advantage that just spamming the homing attack doesn't already. Chaos Control is useful as it speeds you far along the level, but much of the time you don't actually want to use it. When you're trying to complete the hero objective in a mission, that often involves something beyond just getting to the end of the stage. Let's say the objective is to defeat a number of aliens, which it often is. You might charge Chaos Control up from this, but you don't want to actually use it, because if you do, you'll be skipping past all the enemies that you have to defeat. So overall, I found Shadow the Hedgehog the game a big disappointment. It has hints of what I'd like, but it never pushes it far enough to be daring or interesting. The box art in the intro movie will fill you with excitement of all the badass possibilities the game might offer, but it ends up delivering on none of them. Being built on the foundation of Sonic Heroes, maybe it never had much of a chance to begin with. But thankfully, this game didn't kill off the popularity of Shadow, because next year he made a playable appearance in another 3D Sonic game, the infamous Sonic 06. Sonic the Hedgehog, commonly known as Sonic 06, was released on November 14th, 2006 for the Xbox 360 and then for the PlayStation 3 a few months later. It was directed by Shun Nakamura, who had previously directed Samba de Amigo and Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. Sonic 06 is an absolute disaster of a game. It controls poorly, has stages that drag on with no cohesion, is terribly translated, has a convoluted and often uncomfortable story, features a hub world with all the personality of a cardboard box, has a realistic Eggman, Jesus Christ, who wanted that? And is so full of bugs and glitches that playing it feels like it's just barely held together with scotch tape and shoestrings. And I want to say, I absolutely love this game. For me, so bad it's good can't even begin to describe it. This is more like so horrendous, it's amazing. What makes it so great is that every time you think you've seen the worst the game has to offer, it hits you with another hilarious glitch or baffling design choice. I've played through this game multiple times, and every time I do, I find new things wrong with it. It's honestly remarkable just how bad this game can be in so many different ways. You can keep peeling the layers back, but you'll never get to the end. It's a bottomless pit of atrocity, and I love it. Shadow's implementation in it is alright. He's probably the best designed of the three main campaigns, the other two being Sonic and Silver. Sonic plays similarly to how he did in the adventure games, and Silver is just Silver. I can see what they were going for with him, and his playstyle could honestly be a pretty good game if executed better. But as he is now, oh god. Shadow plays similarly to Sonic, although instead of needing to homing attack a single enemy again and again to defeat them, he does one homing attack, but then can punch and kick to inflict further damage. It seems like a small difference, but it makes him much more enjoyable to use in combat situations. Shadow's design is also well translated to HD, and he maintains the ever-present coolness that made fans fall in love with him in the first place. But Shadow in this game is still in this game. And Sonic 06 isn't a game you play, it's a game you play against. When going through it, it feels like anything could go wrong at any moment, which is often what happens. It's practically more glitch than game, and sometimes I'm impressed that it even boots up at all. Shadow has a handful of vehicles he can use, none of which are that enjoyable. Each time I come to a segment with one, I'm always just trying to get through it as fast as possible so I can get back to the core gameplay. Similarly with Silver, I acknowledge the effort that went into these so there's some variety in the gameplay, but the execution is just so poor, I'd prefer them to not be there at all. In Sonic 06's story, Shadow is now a government agent, which is a pretty interesting idea, but it doesn't really go anywhere.
Agent Shadow, E123 Omega has engaged Mephiles. Head to the Wave Ocean, head to Wave Ocean. Agent Shadow, E123 Omega has engaged Mephiles. Head to Wave Ocean immediately.
The fact that he's an agent basically serves as a way to get him into the game's convoluted plot, and then it's ignored. But maybe it's best that they left this in the background, because the more you think about Shadow the Hedgehog having a job, the more ridiculous it seems. Did he have to apply for it? Did he polish up his LinkedIn profile and go through a series of interviews? Does he have a 401k? Do they pay him in real money, or do they pay him in rings? But for all its flaws, Sonic 06 is certainly a unique game. You can't deny that. And for the Sonic franchise, but especially for Shadow's involvement, it represents the end of an era. Because in terms of Shadow having a significant role in the mainline games, this was the last one. Shadow would go on to have appearances in the spin-off games like Sonic Racing and the Mario and Sonic at the Olympics games, but other than that, there wasn't much. He appeared as a boss fight in Sonic Generations, but wasn't playable in a mainline game until Sonic Forces in 2017. He's not a core playable part of the main game, but instead has his own mini-campaign titled Episode Shadow that was released as free DLC. It's just 3 stages and gives a bit of backstory to the main game's villain. Overall, it's okay, and I won't complain too much about a free add-on, but with how quickly it goes by, it doesn't leave much of an impact. So even though this add-on gave me a little bit of hope for the resurgence of Shadow back in 2017, since then, I wasn't given much to work with. The first round of disappointment came when Shadow did not make a playable appearance in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Leading up to the game's release, I was so sure that he would be playable. It just makes sense. He'd fit perfectly in as an Echo Fighter. Just make him a little slower than Sonic, make him hit a little harder, and change his up special to a warp with the Chaos Control. I remember when the Grinch leak was making the rounds, I was certain that my prediction was confirmed. And you might call me an idiot now for believing the Grinch leak, but I have a long memory. And all of you did too. It might have been outlandish, but everyone believed it at the time. Not just me. So, no Shadow in Smash Bros. Aside from his assist trophy, no Shadow in Sonic Frontiers, no Shadow in Sonic Superstars. And after a string of L's, I was pretty much resigned to the idea that Shadow the Hedgehog would remain as a relic of Sonic's past. He'd show up in a spin-off game when appropriate, but in terms of playable appearances in mainline Sonic games, it seemed like that was a run that started with Sonic Adventure 2 and ended with Sonic 06. Never to be repeated. But then, I saw the second Sonic movie. The live-action Sonic movies are decent, in my opinion. Nothing groundbreaking, but they're just intended to be kids' movies, so I don't give them too much flack. I like the second one much more than the first, mostly because the addition of Tails and Knuckles to the cast make it feel much more Sonic-y. I did not watch the Knuckles show. I only have so much time in this life, and there's 15 million things I want to do before I watch the Knuckles show. But in that nearly empty movie theater, someday in April 2022, I sat wearing this t-shirt through the credits to see what I thought had a less than 1% chance of happening.
There's something else. When we were wiping Robotnik off our database, we found something. A file buried deep in our system and dating back over 50 years.
The second she said 50 years, I knew exactly what was going on, and I couldn't believe it. After years of Shadow being kept in the background, he was finally about to enter the most mainstream of mainstream arenas, worldwide movie theaters. Going to see a movie in theaters might be becoming more and more of a thing that people used to do, rather than something they still do, but this was still a huge deal. The second Sonic movie made over $400 million at the box office, so if there was ever an opportunity for Shadow to make a triumphant return, this was it. Frankly, I'm surprised they decided to go with Shadow before Metal Sonic, but hey, I'm not complaining. But looking back on it now, there's a reason I found this Shadow the Hedgehog Lego set in Walmart on December 1st, 2023. It's because of this movie. A movie that aims to make hundreds of millions of dollars needs scores of tie-in merchandise. Toys, clothing, figurines, lunchboxes, it's all part of a massive multimedia advertising effort to cash in on a fanbase's love for The Thing. In this case, it worked on me. I bought this Lego set, but there's another timed product that's much more significant than 196 plastic bricks. It's the newest game in the Sonic the Hedgehog series, Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. The game was revealed on January 31st, 2024, in Sony's State of Play presentation, which I live streamed. So if you'll ignore the terrible quality because I made the mistake of streaming over Wi-Fi, I want to show you my reaction to the reveal. Oh wait, no, is this whole thing Sonic Generations? Yeah, this is just Sonic Generations. Whoa, oh yeah, there's my boy Shadow, hell yeah. All right. Let me tell you now, this is something oh, there's Black Doom. Let me tell you now, I have an unironic love for Shadow the Hedgehog. All right. We're made. This made the show here. So yes, I do have an unironic love for Shadow the Hedgehog. A love that's lasted all the way from Sonic Adventure 2. And while I'm excited to go into Shadow Generations, I'm also worried. I'm worried that the gameplay won't do enough to separate Shadow from how Sonic operates. I'm worried that Shadow's character will be more of the too cool for school edgelord that he's often joked about as being, rather than the calm and stoic character that's the real reason for his appeal. But beyond all, I'm worried that this add-on won't be much more than a cheap attempt to cash in on the incoming movie. The fact that it's being sold as part of a remaster of Sonic Generations rather than its own thing gives me memories of the underwhelming episode Shadow from Sonic Forces. But more than either worried or excited, what I am is intrigued. Since watching the initial reveal, I've tried to avoid seeing any more trailers. Typically, when I know I'm going to buy a game no matter what, I try to stay in the dark about it as much as possible, so I can go in with fewer preconceptions. But there's a few details about Shadow Generations that have me very curious. The first is the logo, in which the O in Shadow is the symbol from his standalone game. The second is the presence of Black Doom in the trailer, who is definitely a character I never thought the Sonic series would revisit. So with these obvious nods to the Shadow the Hedgehog game, who is Sega trying to appeal to here? The only people who will find value in these references are the die-hardest of Shadow fans, the type to risk their identity being stolen by ordering a Shadow t-shirt from a sketchy website. So could it be that they're finally trying to appeal to me? Now that we've discussed everything about what Shadow has been, now it's time to talk about what he is and will be. At this point in time, Sonic Cross Shadow Generations has not released yet, so my next video will be after the game releases, once I've played it. We'll see what answers Shadow Generations gives to the questions that I've asked. Will the game mark the start of a new golden era for Shadow the Hedgehog? Or will it be the half-baked byproduct of a movie's marketing budget? We'll find out in the next video, so I hope you'll join me there.